Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials.
Wow, engagers, and today we have Jonathan Peters. If you want to know Jonathan Peters, he has a very interesting introduction. It starts with questions. So, have you ever heard of an unresponsive or disconnected learner? Could you use great ideas to engage your audience? Are you ready to apply gamification to your programs? And if you answered yes to any of these questions, you're in the right place because we're going to interview Jonathan Peters. He has spent the last 2 decades studying why people do what they do, why they make the decisions they make. And, as a speaker, he has helped audiences from Augusta, Maine, to Melbourne, Australia, to better connect with customers and employees. He's also the adjunct professor at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and chief motivation officer at Sententia Gamification. He is helping people entice, engage, and encourage learners. So please join me in welcoming the speaker, author, and bourbon connoisseur, Jonathan Peters. Jonathan, did I miss anything from that introduction?
You got the bourbon connoisseur in.
Are you prepared to engage?
Yes, let's play.
Let's do this. So, Jonathan, the first thing that we like to ask in these interviews, and it's to get to know you a bit better, maybe a bit more personally, is what does a regular day with Jonathan Peters, PhD, look like?
A regular day is irregular. So I travel quite a bit, so it's very rare that I have 2 days alike in a row. And I was just sharing up in the mountains this week at my parents in San Bernardino Mountains in Southern California. Last week I was in upstate New York, at Buffalo, New York, Buffalo and Rochester, next week in San Diego. So our main headquarters is in Austin, Texas. And I think I'll be maybe 3 or 4 business days in Austin in the month of May. So it's
all around the place.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
What I can pick up from that is that you are probably a million miler in American Airlines or something similar.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah. We'll work on it. I need to get out of this country if I'm going to start racking up those kind of miles.
Oh, that's fantastic, Jonathan. So let's go right into the first question. And here we always start, kind of strong in a way, because we like to ask our guests to tell us a story, and the story of what we like to call maybe the favorite failure when, creating a game or a gamification solution, especially if it's for learning. That's our favorite. And maybe that, of course, probably sets you up for future success or learning. So what's that story, Jonathan?
Yeah, the one I like to tell is because of the learning part of it, what I learned out of it. But I have a gamified program called the Saint Your Grandma's Grammar. And so it's business grammar. It's a 1-day, so far instructor-led. I'd like to move it to more of a hybrid type of course. But I'm not going to describe the whole, all that goes on in the course, but one of the economies, the concept is Grandma loves grammar. Grandma makes cookies. So it has dueling economies, but the one economy is throughout the day you collect cookies, and not real cookies, just poker chips. So if you answer questions, do
I
activities.
like my cookies.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, because there's so much in a lot of people, we don't have physical cookies. We have like little poker chips to represent the cookies, and they stack up and so on, and then you lose cookies and steal cookies and all sorts of things. So what normally the course requires at least 12 people. So there's 3 teams competing throughout the day. It's a 6-hour seminar. And but this one time, this company brought me in and they wanted just 5 people. And they paid the price, and and it's one of those things. I said, "Well, let me try it. I can modify it if the price was right." And so, anyway, my idea was, because it was only 5 people, instead of using the poker chips, I went and bought really inexpensive, teeny little cookies, just like you get in little packages, and you open up and set them out. And what I didn't understand is that I don't put a lot of emphasis on food and eating. I enjoy food, but it's not it doesn't rule my day. And of the 5, I had 3 ladies who have eating is extremely important to them. They're highly motivated by it, and I didn't know it at the time. But so here we are, a very small group, and they refused to open up the bag and take the cookies out, because they knew right away they'd be losing them, touching them, because they're game pieces at this point. Instead, they left their little bags closed and then just did little tick marks to keep track of how many cookies they had. And, as usual, when something like this happens, we think something's wrong with them. They're the bad people, that they were resisting.
They're
training.
broken.
Yeah, they're rebelling against the system. They're, resisting everything. And so I started treating them like they were hostile learners. But later, I realized that I was causing them stress because I didn't care about the cookies. I had plenty of, because I had bought a whole package of these boxes, and I just threw them away. I wasn't taking them on the airplane, so at the end of the seminar, I just threw all the leftovers away. but for them, this was a real treasure. And so it's, it's a concept, we can talk about it here too, but it's a concept I call self-hugging. And, we create experiences that we enjoy. And then what happens is, in this case, I didn't understand the stress that I was putting them under, that they would be losing cookies once they had them. Yeah.
So what would you say here? I really enjoyed the story. And I think there's many things to take away from the story. One of them that I would say is, for sure, and this is a recurring theme, a recurring topic in this podcast at least, it's to get to know your users, your players very well. And of course, you had a general idea of them, and they change every time you play it. But these ones had some particularities. So it's important to know if maybe you have somebody very particular in this group right now.
Yeah, especially in this case where it was a small group, a small set. It was only 5 people. So.
Exactly. Yeah. But is there anything else that you or any what's the learning that you would say? Well, I want the engagers, which is the name of our audience, to take away from this story. It's this. So boom, that would be it. Is there anything that you would like to say?
Yeah, it's not my concept. It comes from Dr. Stephen Reis. He said the concept of self-hugging. And he said, not only do we think everybody should be like us, but that they are like us. So when we're designing experiences, we have to keep in mind, I believe, we have to keep in mind the whole self-hugging concept, so that what I enjoy is not what my learners will enjoy. Otherwise, they'd be doing what I do. Well, and just in the case of all the travel is, I enjoy travel. I enjoy going to new places versus a lot of people who travel like to go back to the same restaurants, and because it feels comfortable. And, I always want to do something new and different. So it's to understand who we're designing for, the experience, we're creating experiences for people.
That makes a lot of sense. And the whole topic of self-hugging is, I mean, again, it makes a lot of sense. So bear it in mind, engagers. When we're designing, of course, we are probably the first test subjects of our own design sometimes. But take it into account. Take into account that sometimes we have a certain bias to designing something that makes sense for us. And we have to make sure that it also makes sense for other people, which is what I'm guessing is more deep inside what we need to make sure. Isn't that right?
Yeah, because otherwise we'll have failure.
Exactly. So I want to move on to take a 180 spin on this and go for something that is, what is the biggest challenge, Jonathan, that you faced and actually solved using gamification and game thinking and these strategies for learning? Yeah.
Is it okay if I share one I haven't solved yet?
Yeah, it could make sense as well.
Just to put it out to the community, and so to get feedback and to start thinking about it. I had this realization, going back to self-hugging, but some folks going through our programs that I don't know if it's as a community, the gamification community, we haven't really looked at it, or if it's just me being blind to this. But the whole possibilities that are in role-playing games, traditional role-playing games. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool as a designer or as a leader or a facilitator, what if we were like a game master inside of the experience? Instead of, usually what happens is we're creating, or at least in my case, I'm creating, I'm stepping out. Or if I'm involved, like in a live presentation, then I'm telling them what to do, telling them to play. But what if we're all part of it, and I'm seeing myself as a player, not a stand back person, but to be actually the game master, like in a Dungeons and Dragons, the game master sets the rules up, but then still gets down and rolls the dice with everybody else and has to play their superpowers. And so that's a wall that I've been obsessed with the last few, probably a couple months now, is how do we change the dynamic of game creators that's outside the game, outside the experience, guiding it, telling other people what they need to experience, instead of sitting down at the table and actually going through it. So that's kind of my thing. I'm always wanting to throw out to the community right now, because I haven't quite solved it yet. So what I need is a situation, a program to work it, and I think a lot of it is just, I can imagine if I think about going through it, the tremendous risk that I would be taking, because I don't know where it's going. If, I set the rules, but now if I'm part of play, if I'm inside the experience with everybody else, what would that look like? So
it's probably very interesting, and it's funny that you mentioned the Dungeons and Dragons experience. I don't know how many episodes ago I was asking, somebody mentioned that I think it was Carl Kapp, that he was mentioning that he was talking about, you have to play board games, you have to play card games, you have to play video games, you have to play all sorts of games. And we went into the role-playing games, like the I'm quoting here, doing air quotes here, of real life role playing games, and how that concept integrates, and if he's tested anything around that. And it's also hard to find a community who's interested, because those are the kinds of games that you just don't go online and play. You need to find like some real people to sit down with you and spend a few hours playing. And it's an experience I've never had myself, but it would be very, very interesting concept in the end.
Yeah, and I think going back to self-hugging, just because I didn't play them as a kid, I played board games and video games and all these types of things, but I didn't play these, so I don't even consider the mechanics involved.
Exactly.
I know, like this place called, this kind of creative group in Chicago called Catalyst Ranch. They're doing more geared towards business, team building, and so on. Because as I was stumbling around trying to find incidences of it, I saw their announcement, and I'm like, I wonder if I get to Chicago and it's just a couple days from now, So, yeah.
Actively looking for engagements in Chicago.
Yeah.
That's your status.
Exactly.
No, and the other thing is, if you think about it, somebody who designed a game, a video game especially, it's not easy to think that person can engage in playing the game and being online and playing. I mean, knowing, because there's many ways, that there's the story mode, so to speak, of many games, but there's also the online multiplayer versions, and somebody who designed a game could perfectly be interested in playing the game themselves as well. Yeah. It's something that I had never thought of, but it's very, very thought-provoking as well.
Yeah, like I said, so I don't have a solution for it, but it's coming. And so, so if we get a discussion going, then we're going to be, and like I said, somebody's probably already out there doing it. Just because I haven't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jonathan, the other question that in this long-winded section of questions that we have is if there's any process that you follow when you're creating a gamification solution. Do you have any formal process or processes that you follow when creating this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our model at Sententia Gamification, and it's what I brought to the company, is because I did a lot of work with Dr. Stephen Reis and the Reis Motivation Profile. And the reason I went to him in his work early on, before getting involved in even gamification, was because of its scientific basis. not using archetypes and so on, and tradition and so on. And it was hard science which someone like me can really geek out on and spend a lot of time at it. And so the basis of his work was the first empirically based taxonomy of human needs and desires. So the nerdy part of it is when we're looking at through all the peer reviews and so on, it's down to 16 core desires that all of us have, and what the difference between you and me and those of us that are designing and creating experiences and our players is the emphasis we put on each one of these, and that's what makes us different. And that's also what creates personality then, because if we have a higher desire than most people for something, or we'll do certain behaviors, make certain changes to get more of that. So like in the eating situation that I just mentioned, those players put more emphasis on food, and so they behave and make decisions in certain ways based on when's lunch. They probably order their day according to meal schedules and so on. So we'd start with, which lots of folks do nowadays, not unique or specific, but creating that player persona, learner persona, and going beyond the usual age range, interests, games they play, and so on, to creating a mock motivational profile for these folks, for our personas, and then being able to match the mechanics to them. So, and this is where we really stress, because going back to self-hugging, there's certain things I enjoy, but that if you just think of the games you play as a child, perhaps your siblings didn't like the same game. I mean, my sister loved the game of life and I hated it, but that says a lot about who we are as people, and, we've lived our lives differently. So it's matching the mechanics, and just the quick example I like to use is the fourth one, because we always list them alphabetically. The last one's vengeance, and this is something that was necessary for our DNA to move forward, was that our tribe needed to protect its resources, and to protect resources we had to conquer other tribes, and so that's where the vengeance comes into play. So because we have data on people going through our more advanced programs, because they take the profile, and so I get to see them. Our people across the board tend to be low motivated vengeance. In other words, winning is not that important to them. I tend to be high vengeance. And so when I came to the gamification world, I thought games were about winning. So if there's no scoreboard, if there's no, if there's no competition and strategy so that I can beat that person over there and win this process, then it's not a game, or it's not fun. And so for me, leaderboards are pretty cool, because
you're self-hugging there.
Self-hugging. Yeah, I love leaderboards because I can see who I need to sabotage. So if whoever's number one, I need to make sure they don't get to work tomorrow. But our community, the folks that are going through our programs, leaderboard would demotivate them. They would not be attracted to a leaderboard, and in our case, because they're so strongly that way, would actually turn them off. They would not just not have fun, but would actually leave the experience for this. And so, like I said, it's not unique starting with a learner persona. We just have this extra element, I guess you would say, that we add in. Thanks to my previous experience and work, because I come from the marketing world, and that's
very
where
competitive. Yeah.
So that's where this type of thing becomes extremely important. How can we anticipate the way people make decisions? So especially if you start getting into the black hat world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jonathan, I don't know if you finished your answer with the process, or do you want to expand it a bit more?
That's good. I can expand forever, how passionate we can get.
For sure. But
you have a 3-hour slot here for me.
So if there's any place where people can go and find out more about your process, you can of course name drop right now. It's a great moment.
Yeah. We're the company's Sententia Gamification, so it'd be sententiagamification.com. And then my email, because like I said, I like to stay in the conversations. My email is bighead@sententiagames.com.
We'll link that in the show notes. Your email, I won't put it directly. It'll say something like @.com, but so that you don't get some spam from around the internet.
Yeah, I try. I have my marketing email.
Oh, good Lord.
The junk goes to.
The funny thing is that they think that if you put your email out there, it means you're going to be motivated to read the crap that they send you, and I just don't get it.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. But anyways, my question was, well, first a comment on the competition side. I also work at a business school, at IE Business School. And our students tend to be super competitive, like super extra competitive. So many of the learning materials that we create, not all of them for sure, not even the majority, but we have many simulations, for example. When you have them live in a full class, they love to have a leaderboard, and they love to make fun of each other. And even when they lose, they're super motivated, and they make fun of themselves and saying, I am the worst player in the simulation. But
I'm number one loser.
But they have like no problem with that. But as you say, there's many different types of profiles and of people, and that can turn off people like massively. So I do have like a big beware sign on my head that tells me, look, where you're designing right now, it makes sense to have a lot of competition because people are super competitive. But in the outside world, there's probably more people that do not like competition than people who do enjoy competition that much. So that's very
certainly in the program you're with, where it was competitive to get in, they're going into a competitive field. So they're making a lot of choices that involve competition.
Exactly. So that was my comment regarding that. I do think it's a fantastic thing to start with understanding who you're designing for. Whichever like field of design you're working in, I think that's something you just cannot evade. And the deeper you go, the better your design will be, because you'll understand your people a lot better.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, we're going to move on now to the second part of the interview, and this is a bit more of a rapid-fire questions. The idea here is to get either quick questions like the ones that we're used to, or maybe there's something in which we're asking for some quick tip or advice, so that we can have something very, very actionable that perhaps the audience can implement. Maybe not tomorrow, but in the short term. So the first question is precisely that. What do you think is something that any gamification project, especially in learning, which is as well your specialty, anything that you think that any gamification project could probably benefit from? Would you say, well, you include this and it's going to be better? It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better.
Yeah, I would say on the what we've been talking about is the creating a learner persona, player persona, and to start from there. It's I think that's the most powerful thing we could do, so that we're designing for them, and keeping that in mind.
That makes a lot of sense. I know in your, I think you have it in the web page as well. The user types that you took from the Reis profile. I think you have an explanation as well in the web page. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'll link it in the show notes as well.
Cool.
The next question, Jonathan, is what is your favorite game?
Yeah, so I referenced my sister loved the game of life, and then at the same time, mine at the time was Othello. I played this game constantly, and I still like the tagline today is "A minute to learn, a lifetime to master." So I was doing that, and then more recently, just because don't get involved so much, but I rotate what's on my phone. So when I get a lot of nervous energy, I'll pull out my phone and play, for 5-10 minutes to kind of blow off that energy. So right now, oddly enough, is Angry Birds Friends. It's I thought I was past the whole Angry Birds thing. They just did a in-game advertisement, and I said, well, let's try this out. And so it's like, I guess they pulled me back in. I thought I was free of the Angry Birds franchise.
It's interesting because having those like quick rapid fire games that you can play for 5 minutes and kick back and say, well, I'm satisfied after playing those 5 minutes. It's super useful.
Because this one has tournaments, so for me, there's a lockout anyway. After 4 tournaments, you're done, and so the longest I could play in the next 24 hours would be, I don't know, 20 minutes. So it's also good for keeping me on track of what I should be doing instead of
I feel that
the old days of playing solitaire at work for 4 hours.
Years. I feel that's something that games could improve on in the future, and it's the games and gamification tend to be great for getting people attached to it. Yeah. But then you say, well, I also want to do other things, and maybe putting those limits in a way that makes sense, of course, because as you say, you're not stopping to play Angry Birds forever. You just say, well, I'm going to play 5, 10, 20 minutes, and that's it for today. I mean, and I can move on with my life, and I'm fine with it. I had a lot of fun. I'm still playing the game. If I were one of their whales, I would be spending my money anyway, but that's it. I mean,
you'd be fine more. But
I play those 20, maybe 40, but that's it. I mean, I have like a limit time, and that's hard to find in a game.
Yeah, that's also the addiction, or not addiction's too strong of a word, but keeping me coming back is because tomorrow I have more tournaments.
Exactly.
And, so it creates that desire for more, even though they limited me on what I could do today, because now I need to make sure I get those in before midnight. So, no, it's actually on I think it's 4 to 6 hours when you get a new life or something like that. But the concept, you understand the concept.
Exactly. That's it. And I love it. I have to say it. Jonathan, is there anybody that you would like to listen to interviewed in Professor Game?
I was like, dead or alive?
Well, Bernardo, I think it was Bernardo that said, well, why not Miyamoto from Nintendo? So, well, we can ask.
From Ready Player One, the game designer inside of Ready Player One would be a great one. One who left his fortune, so, fictitious. No, I'm stalling out because we mentioned a name before the interview, and I totally blanked.
No, it's fine
for recording. So, do you remember?
We were talking about Jane McGonigal as a recurring answer.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so
she's
certainly Jane. Yeah.
She's fantastic, and I promise. Well, I can't promise; it's not on me. But I promise I'll give it a shot when it makes more sense, and we will try it like really hard to get her on Professor Game at some point.
And the other person I would have mentioned, because when I was going through the list of folks you have, but you already have Anjay coming up, so
yeah, exactly.
So he certainly
he will be coming up. That's a breakthrough now. now everybody knows. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love it. Jonathan, if you had to recommend one book, aside, unless you have your book, you can mention it as well.
Oh yeah.
What's that other book that you would recommend for the engagers?
As I say in my book. That's what I'm doing up here in the mountains this week is getting a book proposal ready for a meeting next week with a book the publisher. So look for future books. But I didn't mention, since I've been mentioning the Reis profile, I'll mention his popular book that's accessible. It's a quick read, easy to read, basic kind of self-help style, because so much of his work was, academic and scientific. Bogs people down. But Reis is spelled Reiss, and his popular style book is called Who Am I? And so it's a quick overview of, it's one of those in our field, we don't have to read all of it to get the concept and to grasp some things. So it's a good overview book without getting into all the scientific stuff and variances and deviances and all the wonderful things that scientists rack up. So I think, adding, because again, I've worked with him for, he passed away last year, but having worked with him, I'm somewhat passionate about the work that he did do, and that's an accessible book. It's called Who Am I?
Fantastic. So who am I by Reis?
Yeah, Stephen Reis. Yeah.
Jonathan, what is your superpower when designing gamification?
Yeah, because it sounds like a theme through the whole thing, but no, but it is making sure the mechanics work. In pure game design, they can create a really cool, fun game, and the people that like it come to it instead of the way around. So that Candy Crush can be extremely successful and be extremely unattractive, unappealing to a lot of people. And so they have that luxury as long as they can attract a large audience. We don't, a lot of times, especially in the learning field, we don't have that option. So it's finding mechanics that are attractive to the audience that we're reaching out to, the players that we're reaching out to that's my main focus. Is making sure that works.
Fantastic. And that's super useful when you're creating gamification design.
Yeah.
And now for the last, long-winded question of this interview, we have our famous random question that comes from the audience. Will satisfy somebody's curiosity and by picking into your brains. So let's get Okay. Yeah, this one makes sense as well. So this is the question sounds long, so take a stab at it as best as you feel right. And it goes like this. This is literally what this person wrote. It says, I want to learn about how gamification fares in different cultures. Are there countries where it works better or worse? If so, which ones? What are the cultural and personal characteristics that influence the implementation of gamification?
Yeah, good. What's interesting at the field globally, where gamification is, because we're sitting over here in the United States, and then when we get opportunities to converse with people in Europe and some in Asia, and this week I was talking to someone in Egypt, and it's interesting to see how far behind the United States is. And so when we think of culturally, and the reason part of that is, and so I have two answers, but the short this part of the answer is, if you have this sort of thing where we're not meant to have fun, we're serious people doing serious work, or we already pay them enough, why would we make it fun for them? So there's that kind of resistance on this kind of American work ethic, where you don't take vacation days and you work till you die on the assembly line. So it as a field, it becomes difficult, to get funding to, hey, let's make work more enjoyable for people.
Yeah.
So, but that's like a cultural bias.
But
at least
question here regarding that, because I agree that maybe some managerial levels can have that approach.
Yeah.
But in your experience, especially because you are in the US, and I'm guessing that many of your clients are from the US, even when you get that resistance from probably the higher ranks, when you do get through and implement it with the employees, do you find some similar resistance, or is it completely different, or people receive it very well?
Yeah, I think we can move it and modify it, because we're not, because that concept of games, but all of us, every human learned through play. It's hardwired. It's, this is evolutionary psychology type stuff. We made games as children to get through. We sang our ABCs. We, had flashcards for learning multiplication tables. So I would argue it's wired into all of us as play in general. When it comes down to it, if there's culturally, if someone doesn't understand the game of Monopoly or whatever, or video games, then it's still about play. So the core of gamification, and it's always been that discussion of, did we call this thing the wrong thing? The gamification. But I would argue that we all play. It's just we might have played differently, or we have different experiences. I was given one of our programs last Friday, and one of the participants made the comment that pretty much all sports, every culture has something where you throw a ball between two people. And, so that seems like a universal human thing that we do, and it's so I'm fascinated by that. That's just a random comment.
No, but it's a thread. I mean, it means that people are motivated by this, and that people are interested in this, and that the designs have been of these games have something in similar. I mean, you can say that the stars aligned and that everything happened for a reason, but then maybe I'm just saying maybe it has to do with our nature. I mean, maybe it has to do with the way we think. So
so that would be my reply to that part of it. Is I believe, and I've made this argument from a evolutionary psychology standpoint, that we are all hardwired to learn through games. We naturally do that now as children. Then we went to school and it got drummed out of us. But yeah, so I would say so. To say that there will be cultural differences, so that there will be certain concepts that don't work, or certain, that don't align or don't feel comfortable when we're talking culture, especially around the world. But inside of us, all of us played by mimicking our superiors, playing house and so on. We all went through that process.
Yeah. I wanted to jump in a bit here as well, because I have a very clear example. I'm in Spain, in Madrid, so of course there's an important culture of wine here in general, right, in Spain. So we do have like a case study regarding a winery, one of the many wineries, very famous wineries here in Spain, and the case is super useful. I think it's a strategy case. I'm not sure right now. But then you go, for example, to the Middle East, where the overarching culture is around Islam, and that people cannot consume alcohol. And you say, well, I can't use this fantastic case because they might even feel offended by playing through this thing that is around people consuming alcohol. So there are differences, but it doesn't mean that the techniques used behind this could be similar or different. But I completely agree with that. I mean, there might be different cultures and different ideas and small things that you have to small or big. They could be huge as well, but that you have to adjust. But it doesn't mean that play isn't there. It doesn't mean that we're all humans, and our brains are still the same as we had 50,000 years ago, and we have to tap into motivations to motivate ourselves, to motivate employees, to motivate the students, to motivate many people to actually learn, which is our main field here, but to many other things that are positive to their lives today. We were in a discussion of whether, that deep end, whether the gamification is manipulation or not. And then, there's this whole discussion, etc. But in the end, if you manipulate yourself into doing something, well, is it good? Is it bad? I mean, we're not going to enter into that argument. That the intention is important, and etc. But I'm sure that there's many things, many common threads, as you said, as a ball game, going back and forth in between countries and cultures. I'm sure there's many threads that can be pulled from that. So that was a fantastic answer, Jonathan, I have to say. Yeah. A very broad and very long thing to ask, but it was a fantastic answer.
Yeah, it's something we'd be aware of as the world becomes smaller, and so we're often bumping across other cultures. Yeah. These days. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jonathan, the last thing that we would like to ask from you is if you have any final piece of advice that you want to give to the engagers. And I always say that it's especially for those who have never used gamification, those who are, dipping their toes into the water and saying, well, is this for me? Should I try it? Why should I try it? What's good about it? Is there any final piece of advice you would like to give to our engagers?
Ours is make sure it's fun. It's the final step in our methodology for gamifying a learning program is make it fun, and fun is different for everybody. It goes back to knowing who your learners are, but sometimes we get so involved and take it seriously, and at the end of the day, humans enjoy having fun.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. So, Jonathan,
Yeah.
how can we connect with you if the audience has any follow-ups, or they want to jump into the discussion of how to solve your big challenge right now?
Yeah, please do. Yeah. So through my email, and thanks for thinking about putting the out there just globally for grabbing, because my big head email address is just for the gamification side. So I try to keep that going for conversations.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So we can reach you through your email. There's also the webpage, sententiagames.com. And thank you very much, Jonathan. And it's time to say it's game over.
Game over. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Jonathan Peters, PhD. If you want more interviews like this one, then go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started in our email list. That way, we can be in contact and you will be the first to know of any opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. And before you go on to your next mission, would you like to know how to convince the principal of your school to allow you to use gamification? Then you have to listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there!